Hi, everyone. Hi, Golda. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello. Hi.
So fun to
So
see
fun to see
everybody.
everyone.
Oh, why am I?
Yeah.
I'm echoing. That's weird.
Do you have something else on Zoom open?
No? Oh, now it stops. That's interesting. Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you all?
Okay.
Hi, Wendy. Oh, nice to see you in this class.
Hi,
Fun.
it's a good time for us Aris.
I know that's why they did the class. That's why
Thank
they
you.
did it. They did
Thank
it.
you. Appreciate it.
It's so good to see you all.
Hi there, it's
How?
Shauna.
Hi, Shauna. How are you?
Oh, Baruch
I'm
Hashem.
looking who else. Oh, Ellen's back.
I'm back, Ellen. Yep.
Ellen, sorry. Wonderful to
No,
have you.
thank you. Life is getting back to normal.
Good, good. I'm really, really, really pleased to hear. And we missed you, and it's really great to have you back on.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I see a few new faces. We'll get round to introducing everyone shortly. I hope everyone had an amazing summer. I mean, as amazing can be in the situation we were in, we were in. I don't even know how to describe it anymore. Hi, Kaya. So I had a very wonderful Elul trip to America, met some amazing people, one of whom has joined our Zoom here, Wendy. And I got to see Anne Emily when she was there as well, which was fantastic. Hi, Marcy. Hi, Anne. Hi, Anne.
Tanya, will
Hey,
we be
Dana.
looking at any particular book today?
Yeah. Who just asked that?
Shauna, here.
Shauna, hi. Yeah, no, today not. Today not, because I want to give people the opportunity to go
Okay,
and
good.
buy what we're going to be doing. But I'm gonna explain everything in a minute. We're going to give it till 3:30 to start officially. I just thought I'd open it earlier so that we could all say hello to each other. Um, and
Hello,
when we
Tanya.
how are you,
Hello.
Anne?
I'm good. I am enjoying Tel Aviv weather. My gosh, it's beautiful
Amazing.
here. It's like
Amazing.
summer.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm sure, warmer than it is in the States.
No,
Warmer than
I'm in Albuquerque, and
where
Wow.
in
Wow.
it is 6:30 in the morning. Good morning, Boker Tov. Marcy, I
wow.
was
Funny
wondering if
was
you were
Marcy.
where you were
And
going to
you
be.
and if I may say so, you look great. Your hair color's different, right?
Different.
I decided this summer where I didn't go to the States, I was going to do two things. I was going to let my hair go white and I was going to do ulpan again, which I have done both. So
Wow.
I didn't want to look old. I wanted to look sassy. So hopefully I
Hang
look,
on, from here it looks blonde, if I'm
It looks
honest.
very blonde from here.
you look
It,
great. Why
it
are
is,
you in Albuquerque? Um, I my grandson's bar mitzvah is the end of November, and working back, I am with my sisters here this week, and then next week Atlanta with my granddaughter, and then Florida with my sons, and then New York.
Wow.
So it's yes, I'll be eating my way across the United States. Be
Amazing.
safe. Great.
Amazing. Hi, Rivka Esther. Great to see you. Hi, I don't know if I said hi. Okay, amazing. I'm so happy to see everybody. I can see that we have a few new people. What we're going to do is um, I'm debating what. Okay, so we have 2 weeks that I know people are coming on that are trying out the class. And what's going to happen is this week, I'm going to do a presentation, an introduction to Rabbi Sachs. So I'm going to give it another minute or two till everyone's on. Once everyone is on, I'm going to explain what I'm going to be doing over the next 2 weeks. And I'm just going to give everyone the opportunity simply to say their name. That's all, like say their name and where you live, where you are. And then once we have a cohesive group of the people who are deciding that they're definitely going to stay, which will be in 3 weeks time, basically. We'll do a proper introduction so that everyone gets to know each other. So I'm gonna start the class, and I'm gonna begin by introducing myself, because I know there are a few people on here that probably or may not know exactly who I am. So my name is Tanya White. I live in a moshav in central Israel, Moshav Azriel. That's where I'm coming from on most of our Zooms. I made Aliyah 22 years ago. Can't believe how long it's been. I came pregnant with my oldest, who is now an officer in the IDF. She's 21. And my youngest, I have only girls. My youngest is 9. I started with my children because that's definitely my most important role. But after that, I am a teacher. I've been teaching at Matan for many, many years. I did their scholars program. I wrote a doctorate at Bar Ilan in Jewish philosophy, and I since then I teach at Matan and I teach at Bar Ilan. I am a Sachs scholar. I learned under Rabbi Sachs. I was a student of his in London. I was also close with him, met him on many occasions, and he guided me not only through his philosophy and his life work, but also on a personal level. And I would say that very often when I think about Rabbi Sachs, I kind of don't know where my thought begins and his ends. Okay, it's like there's so much. I'm always in dialogue, I would say, with many of Rabbi Sachs's thoughts and many of Rabbi Sachs's ideas. As part of my project of being a Sachs scholar, I was on the first cohort of Sachs scholars. I did a podcast. I created a podcast of Rabbi Sachs on 4 of his books. We're going to be talking this year. We're going to be focusing on 4 of his books. Those of you that are new to the course, we already have done a year, 2 years, I think, even on Rabbi Sachs's thinking, on Rabbi Sachs's books. So I'm going to navigate the space here because there's going to be some of you who obviously are very informed about Rabbi Sachs's thinking, and there's going to be those of you that are relatively new to his thinking, and there's going to be crossovers at points. The aim of in a minute, I'm going to go around asking everyone who there is. The aim of our group, aim of the course, is for us for 2 aims. Number 1, for us to be able to learn how to read Rabbi Sachs. And I don't just mean here Rabbi Sachs on the parsha. That we're going to leave to the side. It's very accessible. You can pick up Rabbi Sachs on the parsha and get a grip of who he is and what he's saying. What we're really going to be grappling with in this class is Rabbi Sachs the philosopher. What is it that he brings that is new to Jewish philosophy? What lies underneath a lot of his thinking? I'm going to be bringing my background in philosophy to help us to understand the different layers that sit behind Rabbi Sachs. There are certain expectations in the group. That is that if I give you a chapter or 2 chapters to read, that you're going to read them because we're going to come back together and we're not going to be reading the whole book. We're going to be analyzing the various things that we've read. The other aim of the group is dialogue. It's called a reading group, and the aim is that not only do I speak, which I am going to be doing, to offer us guidance and to frame a lot of the ideas behind the book, but the other element of the group is that we engage in dialogue and bring different ideas that we have felt or that we want to bring up as part of our reading. It's much harder on Zoom. I did this for many. This is kind of a model that I started at Matan in Ranana in person. I started it about 6-7 years ago. It was super successful. I then taught for a year or 2 in Jerusalem, but the commute was too much for me. And Chaya suggested that I take it to Zoom. I wasn't sure whether it was going to work or not, but it has been a great success, thank God, the last 2 years. And so we're moving now into our 3rd year of Zooming together. And the big thing is that, and we'll talk about this as we go on, especially for those that remain in the course. The big thing is trying to ensure that everyone speaks and that people don't overspeak. So we're going to constantly be trying to kind of navigate that space, and I'll talk more about guidelines in the next few weeks. The next 2 weeks is really going to be more me speaking because I want to present you a background on Rabbi Sachs. Again, there are many of you who know who he was, who know about his life, who know about biographical details. and even about a lot about his thinking. And there's some of you that really don't. And so what I've done is I've taken a specific theme that I see in Rabbi Sachs's thinking related to today, and we're going to unpack that theme. I'm not going to say any more about myself and my relationship to Rabbi Sachs, because the various anecdotes and stories and things that I have to add will come out throughout the year. So I'm not going to, kind of bring them all now at the beginning. So I'm going to begin just very, very briefly. Everyone goes round. Just tell me your name. Oh, am I recording? Yes, it is recording. Okay. Tell me your name and where you are. And then, as I said, once the group is a cohesive group of people who have registered, we will find out a little bit more about each person. Okay, so let's begin with Ellen.
Ellen Yishai from Israel, Mevaseret Zion.
Thank you.
Formerly New
Okay.
Jersey, but now Israel.
Okay, great. Shauna.
Hi, I'm living in the Daniel, which is Gush Etzion, originally from Toronto. Shauna Tepperman.
Okay. Casey Littner.
Yeah, my name is Casey Littner and I'm in Tel Aviv.
Great. Joan.
Joan Joan Freudenberger in Jerusalem.
Anne.
Ann Kaplan in New Hampshire, currently in Tel Aviv.
Marcy.
Marcy Leff, in Yerushalayim, presently in Albuquerque.
Chaya.
Chaya Grodner, Kfar Adumim, Israel, 41 years, came from Scarsdale, New York.
Nadine. Hold on, Nadine, you're on mute. Also, just to say one other thing to add, and I'll add just now, whether you are new or you've taken the course this is your second or third year. I know that Shauna's been here before. Ellen wasn't here last year for personal circumstances, but she was here the year before that. Casey, you're new, that's right? Yeah. Joan came last year, Anne's from last year, Marcy's from last year, Chaya's from last year. Nadine.
I live in Zichron, and I was really lucky enough to take your course when you were teaching here.
That's right. Okay. Well, wonderful to have you on Zoom now. Wendy.
Hi, Wendy Reback from New York.
Excellent. And you're new to the course. Fiona.
Fiona Van Heerden. I was born in South Africa and lived in Australia for quite a while. And just my husband and I are here. All our kids are in Australia. So we go here and there quite often.
Here being Israel.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Ellen.
I
You're
spoke
mute.
before.
No, not that Ellen. Another Ellen, but you're on mute. Ellen, you're on mute, so we're going to go to Randy.
Okay, sorry.
Ellen,
I'm okay now.
Yeah.
Ellen Moss, I took your class in Jerusalem when you came 3 years ago. And then the time didn't work out for me for a couple of years. So I'm back now. So it was wonderful.
Excellent.
And I missed it. So of
Well,
course,
we're very happy to have you back.
I'm quite
Excellent.
familiar with Rabbi Sachs and his writings. So yeah. Okay.
Amazing. Excellent. Randy. Randy, you're still muted. We'll go to Ayala in a minute till Randy gets back to us.
I'm Ayala Katz. I'm in Israel in Pardes Chana. Just moved here from Beit Shemesh, where we were for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Fantastic. Great to have you on. Randy.
Right, Randy Gelman, Wendy Reback's sister. We're getting to learn together for the first time. I live in Ra'anana. I've been a student of Tanya's for quite a few years in Matan Ra'anana, and I'm getting a chance to do something a little bit different with Tanya this time.
Randy's been in my classes in person in Ra'anana for many, many years, and it's wonderful to have her now on Zoom. Fabulous. Eric.
I'm Eric Mattinson, living here in Jerusalem, and I'm new to the course.
Excellent. Eric is, as you will notice, a male. And that the gender does still exist in my class. And Eric was a little bit ambivalent, but I will be honest with my encouragement. I very much think that it would be wonderful to have him in the class. I will say, however, I have many male students in all my classes. This is probably the only class that has been predominantly female oriented. If, however, there is anyone that feels uncomfortable, please reach out to me privately and we can discuss the matter. Eric is very aware of the fact that Matan has kind of discouraged him being in the class. I personally don't have any issue whatsoever. I think Eric will add a lot, and I think it's nice to have different perspectives. There's nothing that we're discussing here that's intimately related to female, a female perspective. So that's, I just wanted to throw that out. So Eric, I am very happy to have you. And again, by the way, if any of your spouses wants to join, they're also welcome. And if we open it up to men, you can, obviously share it as well. Okay. Where were we? I'm just looking. Diana, you're not, I can't see you.
You see me right now, but really I'm going to be driving. I've had a very long day, not ending. Diana Ostroff, I'm from Hashmayim, and I don't know how long I've been taking classes with Tanya.
Diana's one of my longest.
Maybe you know when you started in Hashmayim, because I certainly don't remember.
Years and years. I reckon it was probably about 15 years, maybe 15 years ago.
I know you took off to have a baby when you were with us, so.
Yeah, no, she's now 10, but as in I was teaching before then. Yeah, she's almost 10.
Right.
Yeah, a long time. We've known each other a long time. So, and Diana's been in this class from the Zoom class from the beginning, so it's wonderful to have her back. Kristen.
Yeah.
Oh, you're frozen and you're muted.
So I'm Kristen. Also, Tanya, I texted you because I was having technical difficulties, so disregard my WhatsApp.
Okay, no problem. I won't see it till after the class. Yeah. No problem.
So I'm Kristen. I am in Palm Beach. I was in Tanya's last class and absolutely loved it and looking forward to this one.
Excellent. We are happy you are back with us. Golda.
Oh, all right.
You're not muted. You're fine.
Oh, I'm not. Okay. Golda Steinman. I live in Jerusalem and I am from the Islamic Republic of Canada.
Wow.
I wish it was funny.
Yeah, so am I. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I am sure we will be speaking about these issues this year, as you know. In a minute, I'm going to give a little bit more of a bigger introduction, but deep breath. Thank you, Golda. Now living in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, 8 years. Yeah.
Baruch Hashem. Okay, Deborah.
I am Deborah from Jerusalem also.
Excellent. Originally from?
Italy.
Italy. I don't think I actually knew that. I knew you had an accent. I wouldn't have been able to say that you were from Italy. Excellent. Okay, Rivka Esther. And Deborah's a long-standing student as well. She's been in the Zoom course the last 2 years and before that also in Jerusalem. Rivka Esther. Last but certainly not least.
Rivka Esther Rothstein. I live in Ramat Beit Shemesh. I was one of my not prepared for men, and I'm just back from my last day at the beach, so I haven't dressed for the public yet. And
you look great.
Thank you. Third year in learning with Tanya, learning by Tanya.
Excellent. Okay, so I
will.
We
put our hats on. Is that it?
No, you're fine. Fine. By the way, the classes are all recorded anyway. You should just know, and the recording is made open, so you don't ever know who's watching the recording. I'm just putting that out there, just so you know.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe only the people that register for the course, but there are people, by the way, that register for the course that watch the recordings that aren't in the classes. So just so you know. Okay. So I'm going to say a couple of things about this course, which is what I think is unique about it. There's a few things that I think are important. My philosophy when I teach Torah or Jewish philosophy, whatever it happens to be, is I don't just see it as an academic discipline, okay? As of course most of us don't. That's why we're at Matan. Okay, Torah is really, really Torah Chaim. It's a living, breathing, dynamic entity that we are constantly in dialogue with. Okay. And in order for us to be in dialogue with it, it means that it has to be open to vulnerability. And that's why we have Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shebechtav is the static, set in stone Torah that is written down, that is immutable, it's not changeable, it can't change. But allied to our text, to our written tradition, we have an oral tradition. And the oral tradition is a tradition in which we encounter and become interpretive agents of the written text. And that's why, in many ways, our Torah is living and breathing because it is an interpretive tradition. However, as we know from the popular psychologist Brene Brown, in order for a relationship to exist, there has to be a sense of vulnerability, which means it's in Hebrew, the word is much better. It's yi'ah, it's gu'ah, right? There is a danger of it being hurt. What do I mean? When we are in relationship with anybody, okay, be it another human being or whatever it is, we know that we open ourselves up because obviously if we have boundaries and we have very big borders, we can't really have a true, authentic, open relationship. So we have to push the boundaries down, we have to push those walls down, and we have to open ourselves up to be in an authentic relationship with the person or the thing, okay? And when that happens, it means that there may be moments in which we will be betrayed or we will be hurt, okay? Or we will feel disappointment or a whole rainbow of emotions that we might feel. That is when we have an authentic relationship. And I will say that the same is for Jewish texts. And I'm not just talking about the Torah vis-a-vis the written Torah, the Bible, okay? I'm also talking about our entire tradition, which includes all of Jewish philosophy and Jewish thinking and various other things. And I believe that our thinking today, when we're learning modern contemporary Jewish thought, which is obviously going to be focused primarily on Rabbi Sacks's thinking, we have to open ourselves up. Now, I'm saying this as an introduction because I want you to know that the first book that we are going to read is a book that is called Future Tense. And I will already warn you, okay, trigger warning, as they like to say in our postmodern culture, okay, I will already warn you that there will be things, especially I think for the people living in Israel, but maybe not only, there will be things in this book that you are not going to find palatable, especially in the current moment that we're in. However, there is a plethora of wisdom in that book that is so timely and so prescient to our moment that there's so much that we can take out of it as well. And that is why I'm talking about the idea of vulnerability, because I think that when we encounter a text, any Jewish text, we shouldn't encounter it as a purely academic expedition. We need to encounter it as a full being, carrying on us the weight of the generations that came before us, carrying on us the responsibility of the generations that are going to come after us. And we in this moment need to encounter that text in the fullness of our being. And we need to be, as much as receiving it, we also need to be critical of it. Okay. And so I often have this debate with other Sacks scholars, and by the way, with also people who run the legacy, the Rabbi Sacks legacy, who I'm very close with. And I often have this discussion about how one creates a sustainable legacy of a great person. And we'll talk about Rabbi Sacks and his greatness and everything else in a minute, okay? But how does one sustain that legacy? And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. Because on the one hand, for a legacy to be sustainable, it needs to come into dialogue with those students and those people who are taking that legacy seriously. And to take a legacy seriously means to grapple with it. to take the Torah seriously means shiv'im panim leTorah, means elu ve'elu divrei chayim, divrei Elohim chayim, means lo b'shamayim hi. All of those things, all of those statements, right? 70 faces of the Torah, these and these are the words of the living God, it's not in heaven, right? They are all about taking the written law seriously, even though we may say that there are things that we don't agree with it. When someone takes something seriously, it means to come into dialogue with that thing, which also means to be critical. But critical thinking doesn't mean negating. It doesn't mean, in the world that we're living in, polarization. It doesn't mean binary thinking. It doesn't mean either you're right or you're wrong. Okay, and this is where we've gone wrong. This is where the world today has gone wrong, in that we are not willing to listen to the other side because we are so set in the way that we think. And so I'm saying, as we enter into Rabbi Sacks's thinking, I think we need to be literally, as the rabbis say to us, why was the Torah given in the Midbar? Because you need to make yourself as the Midbar. You need to open yourself up to all the what's the word? You know, the Midbar is you're making yourself vulnerable to all the climate and all the things that are happening and all the dangers of walking in the wilderness. You're opening yourself up to all of that. And at the same time, the Midbar is the only place where we can really tap in to the authenticity of who we are in our relationship with Hashem. So again, I go back to what we're doing in this class. This class is exactly about that. This class is about analyzing the text, coming to the text with a sense of reverence, but also with a critical eye, opening ourselves up, making the text vulnerable because we want to analyze it, and therefore to analyze it, the text has to be vulnerable. And here I'm talking about the text of Rabbi Sacks, but also the text of the Torah, because he engages all the time with the Torah, but also to make ourselves vulnerable, to make ourselves like a midbar, to come to it perhaps with an open mind, okay? And so in that guise, I want to take us into Rabbi Sacks through a very specific prism. And that is the prism of tikva, the prism of the idea of hope. Why am I coming to that? Because many of you, for sure those of you that have been in my classes, but even those of you that probably only have a limited knowledge of Rabbi Sacks, almost certainly have heard Rabbi Sacks's kind of buzz phrase. And his buzz phrase is the difference between optimism and hope is that optimism tells us everything will be okay, and hope tells us together we will make it okay. And Judaism is a religion of hope, not of optimism. Now we're gonna grapple into this in a minute. But the reason why I want to bring it today is because number one, because I think that this notion of hope characterizes our journey as a people throughout history, but certainly over the last 2 years. And if you look at many Israeli voices that have been, I would say, have been the lay leadership in Israel today, people that are writing on social media, people that are really leading us, people like, again, those of you that are here in Israel may recognize the names, people like Hanoch Daon, people like Yemima Mizrahi, people like Sivan Rav Meir. Okay, there's many people who are speaking our narrative constantly. Okay, and I'm not here talking about the echelons of leadership in politics. I'm talking here about the lay people, the grassroots on the ground. And if you look at their posts, it's something I've noticed. If you look at their posts, a word that keeps coming up all the time is the word tikva. Okay, because there is a very specific Jewish notion of what tikva is. And I believe that Rabbi Sacks characterizes that through his writings. And more than that, I believe that his idea of tikva actually is a microcosm of his macro thinking. And let me share with you what I mean. Hold on a minute. No. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Okay, just give me a sec. Okay. And I want to begin. Okay, you're going to tell me in a second if you can hear this or not. 1 second. Can you hear it? It's an advert at the moment. You can hear it? Can you hear it? Someone speak to me?
No,
I can't hear it.
no.
No. Okay, just a sec. Okay. I'm going to share with you a video of Rabbi Sachs, very short video, where he speaks about the prophecy of Yecheskel. And I want you also, by the way, this prophecy of Yecheskel, which we'll talk about in a minute, is something that was going through my mind again and again and again, Erev Simchat Torah, when we were watching the Chatufim come home. And if you notice, one of the things that the families kept screaming when they saw them was, he's on his feet, okay? And if you think about the prophecy of Yecheskel, of the dry bones in the valley, and how God basically lifts them up onto their feet, it was so reminiscent. But listen to what Rabbi Sachs says here.
Dry bones, a heap of skeletons. God asked him, Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel replied, God, you alone know. Then the bones came together and grew flesh and skin and began to breathe and live again. Then God said, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say our bones are dried up. Of that tikvatenu, our hope is lost. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what God says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. It was this passage that Naftali Herz Imber was alluding to in 1877, when he wrote in the song that became Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, the phrase, Od lo of da tikvatenu, our hope is not yet lost.
Just to frame it for a second, we're not going to look at the actual, it's really worth looking at, by the way, Yecheskel's prophecy, but in it, what happens is that the bones have all dried up, there's like a valley of dry bones, and the people say, Avda tikvatenu, okay, our hope has been lost. And then God comes and says no, and he breathes life into these bones. I mean, it's an unbelievable prophecy. If you read prophecy, it's like mind-blowing how related it is to the period that we've been through, going through. And obviously he's going to relate this now to the Holocaust, because this was done way before the last 2 years. But so when they wrote Hatikva, the reference of Lo Od Lo Avda Tikvatenu is a reference to the people of Israel who said, Avda Tikvatenu, our hope is lost. And Naftali Herz said, no, Od lo of that tikvatenu, our hope isn't lost, okay? And so I just wanted to refer, that's what he was talking about.
Little could he have known that 70 years later, 1/3 of the Jewish people would have become, in Auschwitz and Treblinka and Bergen-Belsen, a valley of dry bones. Who could have been blamed for saying, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost? And yet, a mere 3 years after standing eyeball to eyeball with the angel of death, the Jewish people, by proclaiming the state of Israel, made a momentous affirmation of life, as if it had heard across the centuries the echo of God's words to Ezekiel, Veheveti etchem el admat Yisrael, I will bring you back to the land of Israel. And a day will one day come when the story of Israel in modern times will speak not just to Jews, but to all who believe in the power of the human spirit as it reaches out to God, as an everlasting symbol of the victory of life over death, hope over despair. Israel has taken a barren land and made it bloom again. It's taken an ancient language, the Hebrew of the Bible, and made it speak again. It's taken the West's oldest faith and made it young again. It's taken a tattered, shattered nation and made it live again. Israel is the country whose national anthem, Hatikva, means hope. Israel is the home of hope.
Okay, so I want to speak for a second about this idea of hope. Rabbi Sachs came back to it again and again and again. It was really a leitmotif, like a theme that repeated itself in all of his writings. And I really want to try and dig down deep, just as by way of introduction to Rabbi Sachs, to understand why he kept returning to the idea of hope, of tikva, because and why it kind of has a central place in his thinking. And I believe it's because in many ways it represented the central elements of Rabbi Sachs's thinking. And I want to begin by reading with you a couple of things that he writes on hope. Number one, Rabbi Sachs sees Judaism and the Torah, the Bible, the Tanakh, as a culture of hope. What does he mean by that? So I want to just read with you what he says. Again, I brought here pictures of the Chatufim specifically because I really think, and you're going to see in a minute what he writes, that what he writes parallels so much of what we've been seeing as well. He says, one of the greatest Jewish contributions to the civilization of the West was the idea of hope. Not all cultures give rise to hope. To the contrary, at the heart of many cultures is the idea that time is cyclical. What has been will be. History is a set of eternal recurrences. Nothing ever really changes. Life is tragic. There's nothing inevitable or even rational about hope. And I want us just to think for a second what that means, okay? Meaning, as human beings, we live in the world and we see the reality that exists in front of us. Now, an animal, okay, will see the reality that exists in front of them and they will respond to that reality. So if an animal is hungry, an animal will go and look for food, but an animal will not imagine a reality in which the animal will process things that don't at this moment look like food in order to become food. Humans have the ability of imagining something in the future that at this moment currently doesn't exist. Okay, so what Rabbi Sachs is saying here is that this culture of hope begins, I'm going to talk about this in a second, begins with the foundation stone of the Bible, and that is first and foremost that we are free, that human beings are free. We are free to imagine a possibility of something that can't be, and we are free to act on that imagination. I'm going to continue, okay? I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Many cultures from ancient Greece to the present day have held that hope is an illusion. Judaism argues otherwise, that the universe is not deaf to our prayers, blind to aspirations. We are not wrong to strive to perfect the world, refusing to accept the inevitability of suffering or injustice. No fate is so bleak as to murder hope itself. No defeat is final, no exile endless, no tragedy the last word of the story. There is an echo of this in the great vision of Ezekiel, which we just saw. The prophet sees a valley of dry bones which gradually come together, take on flesh, and live again. Nothing in all of literature so graphically describes the fate of the Jewish people between the Holocaust and the rebirth in 1948 of the state of Israel. Almost prophetically, Naftali Hertz Imber alluded to the text in the song eventually became Israel's national anthem. Od lo avda tikvatenu, I hope it's not learned. Not by accident, this anthem is called Hatikva, the hope. Okay, what Rabbi Sachs is saying here is that first and foremost, Judaism is a culture of hope. In the many other cultures that existed, specifically also at the time that the Bible was written, but even today, they are cultures of fate, meaning what is what is, okay? There is nothing more, or that human beings are not really free, but that we are either in the ancient world at the will of the gods, or in the modern world at the will of modern science, right? We're born a certain way, we remain a certain way. We're born with certain DNA, we remain that way. We're not really free, even though we think we're free. And what Rabbi Sachs says here is that Judaism is a protest against the idea of fatalism. So that's the first thing. Okay, the second thing, okay, so I brought a few more quotes here. By the way, one of the things that I found very moving was Eitan Mor's father, as he walked in to the hospital, was holding a poster, and on the poster was the pasuk from Sefer Yirmiyahu about Rachel mevakar b'neiha ma'ana lehinachem. She refuses to be comforted, and the last part of the pasuk is yesh tikva le'acharitech v'shavu vanim legvulam. Right, there is hope for the future. La'acharitech, for the future, can also be read, by the way, for your responsibility, which we'll talk about in a minute, and your children will return to their borders, okay? Now, I want to show you what Rabbi Sachs says. Rabbi Sachs says here that the idea of hope, of tikva, that is so central in the biblical narratives, that is so central to the culture of Judaism, right, rests on a certain set of beliefs. And what are those beliefs? Number one, that the universe isn't blind to our dreams, okay? That we're not alone, and that we're here because we have been willed to be here. Okay, for us to be, and that our very existence is testament to the creative force of love. Okay, again, listen to what he says. There is, to repeat, no logical basis for hope. The human story, the same facts, the same dramatist persona, the same sequence of events could be told many ways. The Hebrew Bible could be turned into a Greek tragedy without changing a single word. All it would take would be to end its first book, not after Genesis 50, but after Exodus 1. All the hopes in the patriarchs for a land, would be seen to end in slavery in Egypt. Meaning, what is Rabbi Sachs saying? And again, this is going to be very characteristic of his thinking, specifically in his book Future Tense, which we're going to be looking at, which is that hope rests on certain premises, okay? It rests on the idea that, number one, the universe isn't blind to who we are as human beings, to our hopes and our dreams. But more than that, it rests on the premise that as human beings, we are being called to look at the world in a certain way. Meaning, hope isn't just a belief. Hope is a posture vis-a-vis the world. It is the way I come to the world. It is the way I look at the world. It is the way I approach the world. And we can look at the same narrative from the perspective of just this is what is, or we can look at it from the perspective that Rabbi Sachs says, which he believes to be a Jewish perspective, which is how am I going to look at this in the way that allows me to act upon it, to change it for the better? And so he says, hope and tragedy don't differ about facts, but about interpretation and expectation, that they make a moral difference. Those who hope strive, those who are disillusioned accept. And I want us to focus on that sentence, right? Those who hope strive, those who are disillusioned accept. What does that mean? Okay, and I'm going to come back to it in 1 second. I want to stop share just to talk about that for a sec. I want to just finish with the final quote on this slide. Optimism and hope are not the same. Optimism is the belief that the world is changing for the better. Hope is the belief that together we can make the world better. Optimism is a passive virtue. Hope is an active one. It needs no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to hope. The Hebrew Bible is not an optimistic book. It is, however, one of the great literatures of hope. Okay? And I want to talk for a minute about what he says, that those who don't hope are disillusioned, or how he says it, those who are disillusioned accept, and those who hope work or strive. What does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? And why is it so important for Rabbi Sachs that we be a culture of hope, do you think? Does anyone want to venture an answer?
May I?
Sure.
Because it's action. Because it's taking our lives forward. It's not being passive. It is to do. And I've said before, I heard someone say that the word Jew is a verb, to Jew, meaning that we don't necessarily accept what we see, we work to make it better.
Beautiful. So for Rabbi Sachs, I want us to just think for a second. Why does Rabbi Sachs not accept that Judaism is about acceptance of the world as it is? Now, I want us also to think whether this is true. If we think about our history, have Jews always been active? Have they always taken agency of their situation, of their reality?
No.
When haven't they?
Many times. I mean, Holocaust comes to mind. People didn't leave. People stay until it's too late. People, that's a prime example, I guess. So it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, I'm not going to go back in hindsight
Yes.
with that. I don't know
So,
what it would have felt like.
100%. So I would say if we're going to choose one period in Jewish history, or not even one period, a very long period in Jewish history,
Right.
and we talk about the galut, okay? We talk about the idea of the time of exile from, from the 2nd century, let's say, onwards. Like that whole period, it doesn't seem as though Jews took national agency. Like, why didn't we begin to try and return to the land? Like, what's going on here? Now, there's a lot to say on this, which we will talk about because the book Future Tense is a book that is dedicated to the idea of the Jewish narrative. It's dedicated to the idea of Zionism. It's the only book really that Rabbi Sacks dedicates to the story of Zionism. So we're going to be talking about all of these things. But I will say like this. We've spoken many times before about the fact that Rabbi Sacks is a covenantal theologian. What does that mean? It means that he is a thinker whose focus, whose prism through which he sees Judaism is the prism of covenant. What does that mean? It means that for him, to be Jewish is to be in partnership with God. It is to be called by God into partnership. It is to be an active member of humanity with God in order to achieve the divine mission, which for Rabbi Sacks is the mission of healing the world. Okay, his book, which we've read already, To Heal a Fractured World, is a book that talks about the idea that the divine mission for humanity writ large, and obviously in particular for the Jewish people, is to heal all the ruptures and the evil and the horrible things that are in this world. We are meant to be a healing force. And how do we do that? There are two primary ways that we do that. The first is to take agency, is to act on our freedom, is to recognize that we are free to act. And the second is to act in partnership with God through responsibility. If we veer more to one side than to the other, something happens. There's a danger. So if we say there is no God, there is no partnership, there is no transcendence, there's no covenant, it's all an illusion, and really ultimately it's only about human beings, then we get to the point of human arrogance where we, as Nietzsche predicted, right, we turn into gods ourselves. And then we have such things as the Holocaust happen, right? The other side to say, we only rely on God. We are not going to go to Israel because we're waiting for God to bring us back. We're not going to make any efforts because we're waiting for God to bring us a miracle. We accept the terrible situation of the world around us, right? Because this is what God has fated and this is what God has decreed. And we are not going to do anything to improve our lot because God wants to punish us. Rabbi Sacks did not agree with that outlook. And there is a reason why he doesn't agree with this and he doesn't agree with this. And that is because for Rabbi Sacks, the only sustainable method that has proven itself throughout history is what he calls the method of covenant, where on the one hand, we recognize that there is a transcendent power that is bigger than us, is asking us to do something, and that we have to kind of accept is our authority, and that is God. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that as much as we have a belief in God, God has a belief in us. God is calling out to us. The very first words that God says to humanity is Ayeka, where are you? The very first words, one of the constant repetitive kind of words that God says to humankind is Halo shalachticha, I'm sending you. He says it to Moshe. He says it to Gideon. He says it to the Nevi'im. I am sending you to be my shaliach in this world, to help me to perfect the world. When we read Radical Then, Radical Now, a very important book of Rabbi Sacks, and again, those of you that are new, if you haven't read it, I really recommend reading it. That it's essentially Rabbi Sacks' manifesto on Judaism. And Rabbi Sacks begins that book with a problem of evil. And he says, the problem of evil is a perennial problem of mankind. But the reason why it's a perennial problem for mankind is because if we solve it, we won't be active. Meaning, if we say, oh, we're suffering for our sins, we'll just accept it and we're not going to work to make things better. If we say, for example, oh, this is just, you know, kind of this cynicism, or I would say even the stoicism, right, of the ancient world, where, oh, this is just the fate, this is our fate. Again, we're not going to work to make the world better. The one thing that Rabbi Sachs believed in deeply was that we are here for a reason. And that reason is to make the world other than it is. Now, if that is our primary mission, and that is our primary goal, then we have to ask ourselves the question, so why are we Jews chosen in particular to do that? What is it about our halakha, our lifestyle, our mission from God that lends us that particular role? And here I go back to the idea of tikva. For Rabbi Sachs, the notion of hope is so important because what it does is Jewish hope. I'm talking about his very specific notion of what Jewish hope is, because what it does is to allow us as free human beings, it allows us to imagine a reality that is not the given, that is not what we're seeing in front of our eyes, to dream about an imagined possibility of tikkun olam, or messianic times, or peace in the world, or curing disease, or whatever you know, choose whatever you want, and then not just to imagine and dream it, to actively use our freedom to work towards it. Anything that negates that mission for Rabbi Sachs is not Jewish. And that is why he says, as he says here, right, that hope, if it doesn't allow me to strive, or if it means I just accept the reality, is not the Jewish kind of hope. Does everyone get what I'm saying? Okay, a Jewish kind of hope has to be aligned or allied to action. It has to be allied to acting in freedom and in covenant and in responsibility with God. And now I go back for a second to what I believe to be his second, the second thing he learns out from the idea of hope. And this is what we've already spoken about, which is the idea of hope as action of freedom and agency. Now, again, sorry, I actually brought you the same quote as we did before, but let's read this one from The Great Partnership. He says, hope is not costless in the way that optimism is. Now, to me, this is, again, one of, it's such an important definition of what hope is. It's not costless. What does he mean by that? He means, and he says it carries with it a considerable price. Those who hope refuse to be comforted while the hoped for outcome is not yet reached. Given the history of suffering, Jews were rarely optimists, but they never gave up hope. That is why when the prophets saw evil in the world, they refused to be comforted. And again, I go back to the idea of Rachel. Rachel mevakha al banea me'ana lehinachem. She refuses to be comforted. By the way, Rabbi Sachs also brings in the commentary about Yaakov. When Yaakov is told about Yosef, he has such a deep intuitive belief that Yosef is still alive. And he, again, we have Manali Nachem, he refuses to be comforted. This refusal to be comforted is such a Jewish, and by the way, we've seen it with the hostage families over the last 2 years, and it's mind-blowing because it's of it. I feel like it's in the Jewish DNA that this refusal to be comforted, this refusal to say no, this is not the end of the story. They are going to come out alive, right? And unfortunately, we saw some that didn't, and tragically not. But there were many who we really didn't believe did, right? And here, Rabbi Sachs now moves on to the third thing. So remind you, the Jewish story is premised on the idea of hope, that the biblical biblical narrative made a revolution in the world, and that revolution is that we don't accept the world as it is. The second idea, okay, is that hope is allied to action and our freedom. We are free human beings. God is asking us to act as free human beings in the world to bring that dream into being. And then the third thing, and this I think is a super important component of Rabbi Sacks's thinking, and that is the idea that hope is not just an individual aspiration. Hope is a collective mission. Now, why is this so important for Rabbi Sacks? Now, first and foremost, let's just read what he says, and then I'm going to explain to you one of the central ideas of Rabbi Sacks, and I'm going to show you how it is learned out from a much larger philosophical school of thought. And again, I'm using this introductory lesson as a way of showing you how we're going to be learning Rabbi Sacks, okay? That we're not just going to be reading him and clapping hands and saying, fabulous, it sounds so nice, right? We're going to be reading him and we're going to be digging down deep to try and understand what the underpinning of his thinking is. Where does it come from? Who is influencing him? How does it intersect with his own biographical, the biography of his life? And so here I want to show you once again, hope is a collective mission. What does he mean? So listen to what he says here. He says, Jewish time is not linear, but something more profound. I call it covenantal time. Okay, again, we go back to this notion that keeps repeating itself in Rabbi Sacks' thinking, the idea of covenant. What does covenantal time mean? This is a time not as a continuous advance, but as a narrative with a beginning and a distant end, in whose midst we are and whose twists and turns continue to surprise us. I had a fascinating conversation with a young person recently who was really, really grappling with belief, with God, with many different things. And one of the things they said to me, it was fascinating. They said to me, I would give everything up tomorrow, except for the fact that when I look at Jewish history throughout the last 3,000 years, but in particular the last 50 years, and even more particular the last 2 years, I cannot deny divine footprints. They didn't say it in quite that language, okay? But basically what they said was that I cannot deny the fact that there is something totally unusual about Jewish history. And therefore, I can't give up my entire belief system because I feel intuitively as if God has something to do with our story. I think this is what Rabbi Sacks is saying here. Okay, Rabbi Sacks is saying that linear time, it just carries on. Okay, and by the way, there's also this idea of cyclical time, which is also part of the Jewish calendar. But Rabbi Sacks says, no, there's something more. It's what I call covenantal time, and covenantal time is aligned with the idea of hope. And he says it like this. He says the deepest difference between linear and covenantal time is that whereas the first gives rise to optimism, okay, and by the way, this was very much aligned with the thinking of Hegel. Hegel was a very famous philosopher, and he brought in this idea of the antithesis, the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And he spoke about the idea of us moving towards synthesis. Okay, by the way, Hegel was deeply influential on Rav Kook as well. Okay, and we move towards this idea of synthesis, which is, again, in many religions, you can call it an eschatological vision, which is the vision of messianic times. Okay, you're kind of constantly moving towards that, and you're moving towards. Rabbi Sacks says that is a philosophy of optimism, which basically says we're going to get to the end and we actually don't need to do anything. Okay, Rabbi Sacks does not believe that that's a Jewish vision. He believes that the Jewish vision is one of hope. And he says these two concepts often get confused and are in fact utterly different. Optimism is the belief that things will get better, but hope is the belief that together we can make things better. Again, the same sentence we saw before, but in a different place. Optimism is a passive virtue and hope is an active virtue. And what Rabbi Sacks is doing here is that he is placing the subject of hope in an external factor that lies beyond the prospect itself. Okay, so what he's saying is that hope, that there's room, by making room for the fact that hope is far from comforting. Hope isn't about giving me comfort. Usually we think about hope, oh, just be hopeful and everything will be okay. Rabbi Sacks says that is not the Jewish vision of hope, right? The Jewish vision of hope is actually in saying, no, 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 no. I'm refusing to be comforted, not because I believe everything's going to be okay. Being comforted is to say, don't worry, it will all turn out in the end. To buy into the Hollywood story, to buy into the Hollywood ending, to buy into, the idea that, oh, don't worry, it will all turn out well. All's well that ends well. Okay? No, Rabbi Sacks says, no, 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 no. You don't need to be an idiot to see that Jewish history is not about that. He says, however, the idea of not refusal to be comforted is a Jewish thinking. And it's a Jewish thinking because of the fact that faith is not about, I'm going to buy comfort. Faith is not something that it's not easily bought. It comes with a pain and with sacrifice, and it comes with action. And it's therefore the way in which we bring or we have hope is to say like this, and this is why I call it covenantal. Because if I was only relying on humanity, and I looked at what happened on October the 7th and what happened between 1939 and 45 and many, 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 many other instances. And what we are seeing again, as Golda said to us, right, in places in the Western world, right, there is no reason for me to be hopeful, right? So if I'm hopeful, I have to say, I don't know, somehow it's just going to be okay. Like, but there's no reason for me to be hopeful. However, Judaism doesn't talk about hope as a passive virtue. Judaism says to us that there is a dimension of existence whereby we partner with a divine being. And in partnering with that divine being, we have the power through our responsible actions to bring about change. Not just because we as human beings are going to make the change, as we saw. Maybe we don't have a lot of faith in humanity, but because when we partner with a divine being who has power, that partnership procures a certain amount of change in the world. And we've seen it. And by the way, I said this to the class throughout the year last year. In my mind, so many successes that we saw in the war were and what we could only call divine providence. Okay, the beepers and the attacks on Iran and the fact that so many things that happened that we were like, oh my God, this is a miracle. And I say it's not a miracle, because a miracle is saying God just did it without any human intervention. I say that they are examples of covenantal hope. They are examples where we put all the effort in, and God, I call it the invisible string, right? We pulled on our side of the invisible string and God pulled on his. And that is what we call covenantal partnership. And that is at the heart of Rabbi Sacks's thinking. The idea of covenant as partnership, the idea of hope as partnership and covenant. And the final fourth element, which again is quintessentially Sacksian, is the idea of hope as future oriented. As what does that mean? Okay, now here I'm just going to stop share for a second, because I want to add something a little bit more. The Judaism is a future oriented religion, okay, which means it means that we take our past with us on our shoulders, but we always have our eyes on the future, okay? And I think very much about the idea of how many times we could have become victims, and we've spoken about this a lot the year before as well. How many times, how easy it would be for us to be victims of our circumstances, and how easy it would be for us to fall into the pit of victimhood, okay? It's such an easy thing for us to do. But the truth is, we know famously, Lot's wife, who looked behind at the destruction, turned into a pillar of salt. Now, that narrative is a metaphorical narrative on what happens to people who simply remain stuck in the past. We know it from a psychological perspective. We know it from a theological perspective. For Rabbi Sachs, Judaism, and this is why the book that we're going to be studying is called Future Tense. Judaism is a religion whose focus, whose orientation is always to the future. If it's about the way we educate, if it's about the way we navigate our history, our story, okay? So many things are future oriented. And if we go back to the very, very kind of primal moment in our national history, when Moshe turns around to God and says to him, define yourself for me. And if we think about all the other gods in the ancient world, all the other gods were defined by the sphere of influence they possessed in that moment. So the god of the sun, the god of the sky, the god of the Nile, it was all about a tangible sphere of influence that they existed in at that given moment. And Moses says to God, what's your sphere of influence? How do you define yourself? What is your tangible sphere? And God replies very famously, Eyeh She'eyeh, which was badly translated in the Christian versions of the Bible as I am what I am. But the true translation, as we know, is I will be what I will be. Meaning what God says to Moshe is, I am a being that is constantly becoming. And this was an enormous revolution. We often tend to think that the revolution of the Bible was the revolution of monotheism. And that is true. But I would say that the biblical revolution, and Rabbi Sachs speaks about this a lot, the biblical revolution was less about theology and more about anthropology. What do I mean by that? It was less about what God was or God is. Okay. Now, obviously, that has a massive role to play, and monotheism is very, very important. But really, the Bible was telling us about who we are. Okay. The Bible was telling us about what we are as human beings. Now, until that moment, human beings were seen to simply be pawns that were at the behest of the gods. Human beings had no power. Human beings had no agency. If we wanted something to change, we would have to literally sacrifice our dearest things, including our children, to manipulate the will of the gods because we couldn't change anything. And what God turns around to Moshe and says is, I will be what I will be, meaning, right? I am a God of becoming, and you human beings, because you're created in my image, are also people of becoming, meaning at any given moment, you can change yourself, those around you, the world, your perspective, the way you look at things. You can look into the future. We are future oriented. We are constantly becoming. That is an enormous anthropological revolution in terms of the way we think about ourselves. Essentially, what God does at that moment to Moshe is not just to tell him, I am God. He tells him, you, Moshe, can change the world. You can take a people out of freedom. You can topple a dynasty, an empire, just you alone. And Moshe turns around to God and says, I can't speak. How am I going to do that? And God says, Ehyeh imach, I will be with you. If we're going to take one narrative that defines Rabbi Sachs's thinking, and I would say that defines Jewish theological thinking, it is the narrative of Moshe and God at the burning bush. Because what God says to Moshe is a total revolution. We don't think of it as a revolution because we're so used to it. But think about how revolutionary it is. God turns around to Moshe and says, I am the God of your forefathers, and I am also the God who is going to take these people out of Egypt. But I'm not going to do it alone, because I am not a God who has, I am a God that has all the power, but I refuse to be a God that does everything for his people. I am asking you, Moshe, you, the small shepherd who ran away from Egypt, I am asking you, who saw the suffering of the people, who understood what responsibility is, to be my partner. And he says to Moshe, I will be with you. You will be able to do this because I will be with you, but you are my partner and you need to take agency and you need to take the people out. That to me is the microcosm of the macro story of the Jewish people. We are called by God to be a people that holds in our very being, in our very existence in the world, in our actions in the world, to be a light, to be hope, to show the world that hope isn't something that's lost, but something that we can actually turn around and be part of. And again, if you look at what Rabbi Sachs says here, he says like this. He says, there are laws in Judaism about the limits of grief. Shiva, Shloshim, a year. There is no such thing as a bereavement for which grief is endless. The Talmud said that God rebukes one who weeps beyond the appointed time, and yet Yaakov refused to be comforted. A Midrash gives a remarkable explanation. This is what we were talking about before, right? One can be comforted for one who is dead, but not for one who is still living. It says, in other words, Yaakov refused to be comforted because he had not yet given up hope that Yosef was alive. That tragically is the fate of those who have lost members of their family, the parents of soldiers missing in action, for example. Okay, and again, this was written way before the 7th of October, but have as yet no proof that they are dead. They cannot go through the normal stages of mourning because they cannot abandon the possibility that the missing person is still capable of being rescued. Their continuing anguish is a form of loyalty. To give up, to mourn, to be reconciled to loss is a kind of betrayal. In such cases, grief lacks closure. To refuse to be comforted is to refuse to give up hope. And here I have a picture of Dietza Ol, who one of the most incredible women, who I heard speaking also right at the beginning of the war, where she spoke about the idea of how she allows herself to be, for the terrorists, literally and metaphorically, to enter her mind until 11 o'clock, and then she closes herself off so that she can function in the world. And she writes here in an article, she says, I would change his sheets every day as if he was any minute going to come home. Okay, meaning that idea of not being comforted, not to say, okay, this isn't going to happen, but to constantly be working towards that. That is what Rabbi Sachs speaks about, and that is what it is to be future oriented. And now this comes from the book that we are going to read together, and with this we'll finish for today. And I'm just going to open it up for a few comments. Human beings are the only life form capable of using the future tense. Only beings who can imagine the world other than it is are capable of freedom. Now here Rabbi Sachs turns it on its head. Rabbi Sachs doesn't say here, right, that we're free and therefore we can imagine what could be. He says we as human beings, right, have the ability to imagine a world other than it is, not like animals, and that means that we are free. Means we are free. And if we are free, the future is open, dependent on us. We can know the beginning of our story, but not the end. And that is why, as he is about to take the Israelites from slavery to freedom, God tells Moshe that his name is I will be what I will be. Judaism, the religion of freedom, is a faith of future tense. Western civilization is the product of two cultures, ancient Greece and ancient Israel. The Greeks believed in fate, the future is determined by the past. Jews believed in freedom. There is no evil decree that cannot be averted. The Greeks gave the word the concept of tragedy. Jews gave it the idea of hope. The whole of Judaism, though it would take a book to show it, is a set of laws and narratives designed to create in people, families, communities, and a nation habits that defeat despair. Judaism is the voice of hope in the conversation of mankind. Okay, and such an important sentence that Rabbi Sachs goes over again and again and again. And he keeps saying that Jews bring the idea, the voice of hope into mankind. It's no accident that so many Jews are economists, doctors, lawyers, etc. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Every ritual, every mitzvah, etc., is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the blind acceptance of fate. Judaism is a sustained struggle, the greatest ever known, against the world. Can't see it because the world that is in the name of the world that could be, should be, but is not yet. There is no more challenging vocation throughout history where human beings have sought hope. They have found it in the Jewish story. Judaism is the religion and Israel the home of hope, which again relates to the video that we saw. We're going to come back next week and I'm going to show you how I believe the three pillars of Rabbi Sachs's thought characterize this. But for the minute, I want us to just go back. What I hoped to have shown you is that There are many, many layers to Rabbi Sacks's thinking, but there are 3 or 4 central pillars in his thought. One is the idea of covenant, 2 is the idea of human freedom, 3 is the idea of responsibility, and 4 is the idea of the fact that we can imagine a world other than it is, meaning that we need to be future-oriented human beings. Now, all of those 4 pillars, okay, come together through the idea of tikva, of hope. Rabbi Sacks was deeply influenced by positive psychology, and he was also deeply influenced by what we're going to see this as we go on, by communitarian philosophy. Communitarian philosophy is the idea that as human beings, our definition of self is not just the idea of a free-floating atom disassociated from anything else except the thinking mind, as Rene Descartes famously told us, but rather that we are born into certain conditions, we are born into certain ties, we are born into certain religious proclivities, whatever you want to call it, and those things define us, right? Our orientation is always going to be with the yoke of what we have come, or where we have come in the world. And so Rabbi Sacks says the same way in which we decipher our moral codes. Our morality is always going to be defined by, we can't act to change the world alone. We have to act to change the world in partnership with those around us. And this is going to be also sit at the heart of his political philosophy and also sit at the heart of his religious philosophy. Rabbi Sacks says that only through community, only through recognizing that we have to act together in partnership with something outside of the self, only when we recognize that can we have a morality that is sustainable. So for Rabbi Sacks, as we've seen, hope rests on his communitarian philosophy, which is the idea that hope is about us working together with others in order to bring about a better world, to imagine that world and to act upon it. Okay, with that, we're going to finish. I'm going to open it up for very quick comments because we've got to be done in 3 minutes. And I am going to say one thing else, is that the class is going to run from 3:30 to generally to 4:40. I have to collect my daughter, so I need to ensure that we finish at 4:40, but I'm going to open it up if there's anything that anyone wants to add or any question that anyone wants to ask briefly before we go.
Will there be readings that we're going to do every week?
There will 100% be readings. I suggest if you already know that you want to take the course, you go already and buy Future Tense and start reading it.
What's the second book? What's the second book you said you were going to read?
The book after Future Tense, hold on, I need to check what I wrote. What also we're going to do is we have an existing WhatsApp group. If once you've registered with Matan, I will add you to the group, and on that group I will send out all the messages, and that's how we keep in touch, and I send extra readings that we have. The book after is, I haven't got it written here. I think it's going to be 1 people, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'll let you know next week. I'll let you know the 4 readings. The 4 readings, I can tell you what the 4 books are, but I don't know in which order we're going to do them. Okay. Future Tense, 1 people, The Dignity of Difference, and Arguments for the Sake of Heaven. Arguments for the Sake of Heaven will be the last book because it's an older book of his. It's a bit more difficult. It's not as user-friendly as the other 3, and so we'll see if we get to it, but that's going to be the 4th. I'm not sure yet whether I want to do 1 people first or I want to do the Dignity of Difference. I think we may do the Dignity of Difference second, because 1 people and Future Tense have overlapping themes, so it might be good to do Dignity of Difference second. We're definitely beginning with Future Tense. On top of the reading, which again, I just suggest that you just go at your own pace and read it. On top of the reading, I will also be sending extra things. Again, not compulsory, the extra things. They're often there to give you a bit more of a background on what we're doing. I may send an article by Rabbi Sacks or even an article by a philosopher that Rabbi Sacks was influenced by. I often send out certain songs or certain articles or certain podcasts that are related to the discussions that we're having. And that's why it's really important that once you've registered for the course with Matan, please message me directly. Those of you that don't have my number, I'm going to write it now on the chat. message me directly and I will add you to the class. I'm not going to create a new group, so I'm going to ask for whoever's on that group that isn't part of the class just to leave. Yeah, Ellen.
Will you be posting the presentation?
Yes, I will do exactly
Okay.
do that as well. I'm going to send the presentation to Martin to send you all by email, but I'm also going to post it onto the group for sure.
Wonderful.
And you wanted to ask?
Can you include in today's class, can you just send that brief 3-minute video that you did of Rabbi
Course.
Sacks?
It's actually on the PowerPoint. So what I'll do is, if I can, I'll send the PowerPoint itself rather than the PDF of the PowerPoint. But I'll also send the PDF to anyone who wants to print it out. But
And
if
you
not, I'll
also,
send it.
It
you
will
also
also be on the
mentioned
recording.
you-
Sorry, it'll be on the
you-
recording.
You also mentioned 3 individuals that you follow their podcasts that follow social media. Could you just write those 3 names in today's notes? I didn't catch
Yes,
them.
I'll also put them on the group. I'll also put them on the group.
Thank
Okay, I'm gonna hold off putting anything on the group for a day or two to give those people that do want to register for the class, to give them an opportunity to register, and then I can add them, and then I'll post everything I promised. Rivka Esther, have you made notes of what I promised to send? Where is she?
No,
She's
but
on
I think
here.
people have like added to the list
Oh,
of what they want you.
Hold
So
on, let me just write it so I don't forget. We said the 3 people I spoke about following. We said the YouTube link of the video. We said the PDF, and we said
podcast,
the PowerPoint.
and your
Okay.
podcast favorites.
Oh, well, no, that will come. That I haven't yet recommended you any podcasts, but as we go on,
In the
I'll
past, I think
what
you
I will
have.
send you is the podcast of the Rabbi Sacks podcast that I did, which you're all welcome to listen to also. So wonderful. I think this is going to be a great group. I'm really excited. And please God, we'll meet again next week.
Thank you very much.
Have a good week in the meantime.
Thank you
Bye,
very
everyone.
much.
Bye.